After I graduated college, I went into the Peace Corps. I worked in Benin, West Africa, talking to village groups about how the environment was changing and how building a mud wall around their fireplace would give them a safer and more efficient way of cooking with wood. I came up with some fun ways of communicating the concepts to people, and having a tendency to be playful, I was well received and seemingly successful at my work. But to be honest with you, it didn't feel very good to me. Over my first year of service, I had come to feel more and more that I was doing the right thing for the wrong reason, that a sense of guilt at my own privilege had led me to Africa, but actually, the life I wanted to live was elsewhere, back in the States. I felt I was performing, chasing after the opinions and recognition of people from home that I was carrying in my head. My own heart was not in it, and I was struck by the irony that I felt like a fraud, but my work was about empowering people to take control of their lives. I also felt very much alone. I lived in a house by myself, and I was one of 2 Americans in a city of about 60,000 people. Being obviously a foreigner and feeling constantly self-conscious as a white person in a community of black-skinned people only served to intensify my sense of disconnection. I tried everything I could to think my way around what was growing in my mind. I spent hours writing in a journal, hoping to get things figured out. But my feelings of inauthenticity continued to grow rather than abate. I felt trapped and constricted. Up to that point, I had spent my life on the path of being a good student and trying to be a good person. I had made a commitment to serve for 2 years, which at 21 years old seemed like a lifetime, but it had brought me to a dead end. I was spent, confused, and unhappy. I felt I was on the final square of a board game that led nowhere. My spirit was bleak, and I was desperately in need of renewal.
I'm a workaholic. My mother and the times I was raised in taught me to believe that I am worthy only if I am doing it all, taking care of everyone else, and being the best. I spent a good part of my adult life coming to terms with the fact that that is 1, just not possible, 2, very unhealthy, and 3, not possible. So, with this kind of messaging, I was destined to overdo and overcommit. I have a tendency, when I design, to procrastinate. I think it's fear of criticism, maybe, but I'm not truly sure. I do put it off for quite a while. I know I feel very vulnerable when I create, even as I'm driven to do so. It's definitely a very important part of my work. It feeds my soul, but instead of jumping right in because I love it so much, I hesitate. That often contributes to the start of a downward spiral. I confess I'm a little weird about how I procrastinate. My preferred method isn't watching TV or reading or hanging out with friends. I actually work to procrastinate. I just do work that isn't threatening. I do bookkeeping, or I do accounting, or I organize, or I clean the kitchen, or I vacuum the floors, or I organize a closet. Somehow I justify putting off the emotionally hard stuff, the stuff that makes me vulnerable, by doing the other work. The final square for me is synonymous with the end of my rope. If I get there, it means I've been ignoring the signs to slow down for quite a while. And that circle I do of procrastinating the work that feeds my soul and doing the work to avoid that sends me into this overload. I have very definite symptoms that it is time for me to renew and to regroup. I find myself pushing through to get a project done, pushing aside the niggling words that there are other important things that are being neglected, working late into the night, and then skipping yoga the next morning because I'm too tired and I need the sleep. Crawling on the floor, building sets, using power tools, hanging lights, standing on the stage and looking up into which I'm not supposed to do, so I'll do it this way this morning, looking up into the fly loft, all of these things that hurt my very fragile neck. And I just go full bore into these things because I'm in too much of a hurry to do it the careful way. Then I need painkillers to sleep at night and even to keep working sometimes. I get cranky and I get short-tempered. I run late, mostly because I feel like I'm shortchanging everything. So I feel guilty about stopping this project to get to do the next. I start to feel insecure, so I start apologizing a lot. Then I need to puff myself up to get over the feeling of feeling bad. I feel afraid that the work I'm producing is not good enough. My perfectionism then kicks in. It's a never-ending spiral taking me down. It affects all of my relationships. I become impatient with students who are procrastinating instead of encouraging different choices from them. I sound harsh and critical when talking about others, even though that's not my meaning. I lose the ability to express nuance because I'm shortchanging everything because I'm in a hurry. I am frustrated with my circumstances. I'm frustrated with things that cost me time, and I resent people that make more work for me. All the while, I'm isolating more and caring for myself less in a never-ending pain cycle, emotional and spiritual and physical. I'm hurting, and I've arrived at the final square. My path to renewal always starts with a reminder that the journey is what is important to me. I didn't always know that, and I certainly don't always remember. Christopher, my oldest child, who just turned 32 a couple weeks ago, when he was first born, I gave myself permission to slow down and take the time I needed to care for myself so I would be available to care for my baby. It was a wonderful time in my life. We spent time laying under trees and looking at the light shooting through them, and beautiful time of mother and child. But as he grew, I went back to work, first part-time and then full-time. I got wrapped up in needing to earn money. We needed a bigger house and a new car and all of those things that our world says we need. I also tried to take care of everyone else without taking care of myself. I hadn't figured that out yet. I was the person on the airplane that didn't live the motto, put your own mask on first. I've had to learn and relearn that it is okay, and more than okay, to care for myself. When Chris was 2 years old, I read an article by a very wise man. Now, I don't remember his name, but I certainly remember his words. His story was about his own child, and his revelation was something that we truly know, but few live by. The week after I read the article, we took a trip to the beach in Palos Verdes. Normally, it's about a 15-minute walk from the parking lot across the bluff and down the cliff. We arrived, we parked the car, we loaded all the stuff onto our backs, lugging the toys and the sunblock and the extra diapers and the food and the water, and we headed out. It took only a few minutes before we started getting frustrated. We kept stopping every few feet and squatting down and examining something or other, and the parents started going, because it was going to take forever to get across the bluff and down to the beach. So we were just about ready to pick Chris up and throw him on Rick's shoulders when I remembered the final line of the story. To a child, the journey is the destination. I looked at Rick and said, "The journey is the destination." We spent our walk sniffing flowers and picking up pebbles, looking at bugs and pretty dirt and poop. As we got to the cliff, the seashells appeared, and then the sea lions. The dolphin came, and seagulls, and pelicans, and people. The walk took over an hour, and because we chose to relax and just enjoy the journey, it set a wonderful pace for the entire day, a day with our son and the wonder of his world. I tell this story because for me, the first step in restoring myself is staying present in the moment. As I mentioned earlier, it's easy for me to get distracted and wrapped up in getting things done rather than enjoying the doing. And as long as I'm still saying yes to everything rather than being discerning about what I choose, I'll keep on spinning. So when I acknowledge that I am not caring well for myself, and it's not just a matter of knowing, it's really a matter of admitting it, because I know it long before I go, okay, stop it. I slow down, I say no, I become selective. I then allow the time for exercise, which means yoga 3 days a week and walking the treadmill in between and going for walks and hikes. I leave time for gardening and for friends. I also, this is an ongoing thing, but I simplify. I have been simplifying for years, one little step at a time. I simplify how I pay my bills, how I handle the mail, the way I do the laundry and the way I put it away, how I do my hair, how I wear my makeup, how I get dressed in the morning. I've been simplifying how we do our work, which is a kind of a big thing, little things at a time. Because of the nature of the work we do, we are usually the first ones in and the last ones out on an event. So if I can simplify one little part of the process that saves us just 15 minutes, not only have I saved us time and money, but more importantly, I've given us 15 minutes more to sleep, which is really important when you're working 20-hour days. Obviously, it's not quite that simple, and it would take multiple changes before we could trust taking that 15 minutes of sleep. But that's the idea. Right now, my simplifying has become hyper-focused, as I am focused on having less stuff. If I have fewer things, my life is less cluttered. It's easier to find what I need. There is less to clean, less to maintain, less to care for. All of that gives me more time to spend doing yoga, gardening, enjoying my family, spending time with friends, holding my grandson when he's born, and creating art, life. I find it hard to create when I have clutter in front of me. So my goal right now is to get rid of anything that doesn't give me joy. These feed my soul, and that's my destination, finding time to renew my spirit. As Rumi says, life is a balance of holding on and letting go. When I get too wrapped up in the busyness of the world, I take a moment, I regroup, and I go back to square one.
So where was I? Oh, yeah, the part where I was feeling trapped and bleak. As you may have guessed, I figured it was time to go back to square one. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and this wasn't working out, so I decided I needed to unvolunteer. I had known all along that I could come back early if I wanted, but nobody wants to be a quitter, and I resisted that option for as long as I could. When I made the decision to let go of living up to those other-centered expectations, I felt truly liberated. A weight had been lifted, and I felt I could breathe again. It was more than a month before I actually returned to the States because I wanted to bring the work I was doing to a good conclusion. But the knowledge that I had chosen to take care of myself buoyed my spirits. I was headed back to square one, and it felt great. I remember very clearly being greeted by my parents on a bleak February day in Boston when I returned home. Everything was gray. The sky, the streets, the snow. But to me, it was in vibrant, living color. I felt so happy to be back in a familiar and comfortable environment. Even all the little details of the physical world, like light switches and carpeting, a tablecloth, everything felt comforting to me. This story is a pretty extreme example of what renewal can mean. None of us certainly wants to get stuck in such an uncomfortable place. But let me share some thoughts with you about how I think we can foster renewal within our own lives and avoid end up burned out and bitter. Renewal is contingent on a willingness to surrender, to release what we think we can't let go of. For me, it was notions of who I thought I was supposed to be. I had to say, I don't know what the answer is, but this isn't it. For the girl in our children's story this morning, it wasn't until she recognized that she hadn't mastered the magnificent thing that she was able to find her way to the right design. Along the same lines, I believe getting to a sense of being renewed benefits from a willingness to be vulnerable. And I find this to be the case every Sunday I attend services here. The first time I came to CVUUF, the sermon was delivered by Michael Esselin, a Unitarian chaplain in the oncology department at the UCLA Medical Center. He spoke of his experiences with people who were right up against the final days of their lives, of patients who were trying to atone for bad decisions they had made in their lives, of others who were buoyed by a faith they had carried all their lives, and still others who were quiet and alone as they faced the end. I was profoundly touched by the compassion and sensitivity he brought to the conversations he recounted. I ended up with tears streaming down my cheeks as I sat listening that day. I felt renewed by letting those tears come because they connected me to difficult and unresolved issues in my own life. I knew that day CVUUF was my spiritual home. And one of the many reasons I come here is that it continues to give me a space to release those tears. For me, it is a good Sunday service if at least once I feel my eyes welling up. And I think it makes my laughter in the rest of my life that much richer. There's nothing like a major shift in perspective that can renew one's spirit. Getting distance, changing the channel, going for a walk or going for a trip, shake up the way we are seeing things and get us out of the mental ruts we fall into. When we can do something to make the familiar seem a little strange, we can come to see things differently. Earlier in the service, I asked you all to greet each other silently with the idea that you might experience the welcome in a new way. And it's interesting to think about the word itself, renew. There is a built-in contradiction there. New. Again, it's not just new. It is new with history. Renewal is not possible without a past, without those oh so frustrating times. Renewal is powerful and important because of the experiences that precede it. In her comments at the service she led a few weeks ago, Carol Flanagan asked a great question of all of us. How can we become a community of renewal? I think there are many ways to answer this. One of my responses is to recognize that we already are that community. I think that's why I so often feel things when I'm in this sanctuary that I don't otherwise experience. Another response is to refer to our congregation's covenant of good relations. Assume good intentions of those with whom we disagree. I admit this is very much a note to myself, because I find that when I am most entrenched in my own self-righteousness, I am also most in need of stepping back and shifting my perspective. It didn't make it onto the order of service, but the full title of our service this morning is actually Back to Square One, but in a good way. I think we tend to envision this experience of going back to the drawing board with a sigh and slouched shoulders. When looked at from a different perspective, though, returning to where we began can be a profound spiritual gift. May it be so.